Hey everyone, this is Kevin the Entrepreneur, and before we get into today's episode, we are coming off the morning after the Oscars, and I just want to comment really briefly, if you will indulge me a bit, because I love the Oscars for some reason. First of all, there was no envelope snafu, and I was, of course, happy to see that. But even more interesting, there were two highlights of the night that I just have to brag about. First of all, I am so happy that Glenn Keane is officially an Oscar-winning director. He won the Oscar for the short Dear Basketball, which I'm going to link to it below in case you haven't seen it. It's a wonderful short, and I don't even like basketball. And Glenn Keane was the lead animator for characters like Ariel from The Little Mermaid and Tarzan. He was like a Disney legend, so I was just so happy for me to see him win. Also, I have to admit, I find it very interesting that um that Shape of the Water won Best Picture. I mean, in a year that was so politicized, where it's like, well, which minority are they going to award? Are they going to award the women with Lady Bird? Are they going to award the African Americans for Get Out? And both would have been great choices. Would they find a middle ground with Three Billboards? And they gave it to The Shape of Water, a science fiction fantasy. That's just so weird. I'm kind of have a lot of respect for them for that. I liked all the movies though. Anything could have won, and I would have been perfectly happy. Although the Post probably was not worthy of winning. Well, anyway, I rambled for now a couple minutes, and I know what you guys are really here for. You're here for this. This whole study that shows that drivers are getting paid peanuts. And I wanted to report it a couple days ago, but I actually kind of held back, partially because I was busy, but also partially because I kind of want to see what Uber's response was. I thought it would be very interesting, and they responded in the most childish way possible, to the point where it's like, if you are not convinced that the new CEO is no different than Travis Kalanick, then I don't know what's going to convince you at this point. But according to this article from Fortune, Uber and its CEO, Dara K, pushed back swiftly against a new MIT study claiming that the median income for Uber and Lyft drivers is just $3.37 per hour, and that 30% are actually losing money while they work. And I don't know if it's quite that low, in all fairness. I can usually easily make $20 an hour. Of course, I live near big cities where there's a lot of tourists and they go long distances. If you go someplace that pays even less than where they pay me, and they're not going long distances, then yeah, I could see that's a problem. But also, you always have to keep in mind whatever your, face value intake is, you always have to deduct like depreciation and wear and tear. And so, yeah, you do make a lot less than what's on the app. But that's what the study set out to find. What do drivers actually take home? And this MIT study did a research, and they determined that drivers, both on Lyft and Uber, because Lyft isn't entirely, they're not innocent in this either. The drivers make like $3.37. And, well, Dara responded, like all mature CEOs do, on Twitter. On Twitter, he wrote that MIT equals mathematically incompetent theories, at least as it pertains to ride sharing. Tech Review report differs markedly from other academic studies, and the Rideshare Guy recent survey are analysts. So, it's interesting that Uber pulls in the rideshare guy of all things. I mean, Harry's a good guy, don't get me wrong. I haven't spoken to him personally, although I would love to sometime. But he has always struck me as fair and knowledgeable, and I read his blog all the time. And it's interesting that they're bringing Harry in to defend them for paying low wages when Harry actually complains all the time that Uber doesn't pay enough, at least from what I've read. Describing MIT researchers as incompetent is a big swing, and also seems to diverge from Dara's aspirations to a kinder, gentler approach to leading Uber. And Hall's claims to have found a flaw in the MIT study are, at least as presented, not entirely compelling. And that's kind of been the big thing that I've had an issue with Uber swinging back at MIT. When MIT put the study out there, I kind of sarcastically, maybe even hopefully, thought to myself, oh, so are you going to respond with some alternative data, maybe some different numbers, maybe you're going to show aspects that maybe they aren't, entirely accurate, and yet Uber's response was to say, "We don't think you calculated this properly. We think it's incompetent. We think this is irresponsible. And we would like to talk to you about why it doesn't match up." Because here's the thing, I'm not good at math. I've never been good at math. But if there's one thing I know about numbers, is that numbers are numbers. If it's pure math, they come out scientifically. And while there are aspects with numbers you can do to kind of shift them a little, they ultimately don't change. Like, for example, if someone says, 25 million people have a heroin problem in America compared to 8 million in Japan. And I'm not saying that's like the actual numbers, I'm just using an example. But say America has 500 million people and Japan has 20 million people, then even though one number sounds bigger, it's really less. But that's the only way numbers can really be twisted in the way that they are claiming they are. And the thing is, the rideshare industry is so new and so different that Uber needs to actually provide some real solid numbers on why this research does not add up. And they have not done that, and they failed to do that. And by bringing other people into the conversation, they had some responses as well. Because the MIT used data from a survey conducted by the rideshare guy, aka Harry Campbell, a leading independent analyst and rideshare driver advisor, which, he's earned that title. Hall argues that some of the questions, because of unclear wording, could lead respondents to misreport how much time they spend working for ride-hailing services and misreport income from other sources. That, he says, drives down the hourly rate, MIT reported, by nearly 60%. Which, yeah, again, that could be fair. Again, that's kind of that whole, But the problem is, it's actually pretty easy to calculate if you're good at numbers. It's like, how much is Uber paying? How much is the write-off worth? How much gas? Car depreciation? These things can actually be scientifically calculated, and I don't know how, the differently worded questions would alter that too much. It just wouldn't. And in the end, Hall's critique seems to hinge on a fight over how respondents interpret a series of not terribly well-designed questions. On Twitter, Campbell says he has since modified at least one of the survey questions. And he says right here, as you can see, "I wrote the question and thought it was pretty clear. How much do you make per month from Uber driving? To be fair, I modified it in 2014 to be more clear." Meanwhile, Hall says Uber doesn't take issue with the MIT study's assessment of drivers' costs, a major factor in its calculation of lower per hour pay. Those costs, including lease fees or depreciation and maintenance of vehicles drivers own, have been excluded from many prior studies of Uber driver pay. And in this study, they included it, which would definitely alter, the final number on how much Uber drivers make. Hall cites one such lopsided study in his rebuttal, which was co-authored by an Uber employee. Easily, one takeaway from all this is how little unbiased analysis there is about the pay question. And yeah, in all fairness, no one's unbiased. Everyone's biased, regardless what side they're reporting on. So I'm biased as I report this. I'm going to try not to be, but I probably am. Setting averages aside, the most recent version of Campbell's annual driver survey found that 30.9% of Uber drivers reported earning less than $15 per hour before expenses. And the before expenses is always the tricky part because, again, you think, oh, good, I made $50 today, but I got to get gas, and that's going to cost me $35. Not really making that much, am I? So the MIT study found that driver expenses were about half of the revenue on a per mile basis, a finding that, again, Uber doesn't contest. And that's the strange thing about this. Uber is calling the MIT study useless, skewed, inaccurate, incompetent, and yet they aren't actually disputing any of the numbers. They just aren't. So even if it's not $3.37 per hour, many Uber drivers' real hourly income is indeed significantly below minimum wage. And you know what? I'm going to state it again. I've stated it before. I will just state it again. Uber could easily get out of a lot of these problems by making it so that regardless how long the trip is, they are getting the hourly minimum wage guarantee for each individual trip. That way, if they only take one trip per hour, they have made minimum wage. Now, I know Uber doesn't like that idea, but then why should they care? Charge it to the passengers. I know they don't want to charge the passengers more. But if you are paying the drivers minimum wage upfront with each ride, not only do you avoid all of these lawsuits that say that they're being paid well below minimum wage, but people probably drive more because, yeah, if you make minimum wage in 15 minutes as opposed to an hour, some people are like, well, I will just keep driving. I will make 3 minimum wages in the hour. They would love that, and you would have driver retention much easier than you do now, but they don't want to do that. As for the MIT study, I've read it as best as I can. Some of it doesn't completely line up with what I make personally, but I also know that I am in one of the few better paid markets, which is still pretty sad when you stop and think about it. And I'm not as good with numbers, so I could not honestly critically evaluate these numbers anyway. But the things about the expenses and the mileage, they ring true. And I know that even though I'm making more than $20 per hour on the surface, I'm probably making closer to 11 or 12 an hour when you factor all that in. And I was really hoping Uber would respond to this properly, but of course they haven't. And of course, the interesting thing is now that Dara has actually shown to not be super diplomatic when it comes to being questioned about the rates. Like, that's the thing that Dara has always avoided. He's talked about, we want to make things easier, we want to make things more convenient, we want to make the world a better place, we want to make the bus system more transparent, and yet, when someone asks him about numbers, simple math, he has no answer except to throw a hissy fit. So, I don't know. I mean, that's kind of where I have to leave it, guys. There's nowhere else to go from there. Like, why can't Uber dispute these numbers? I don't know. Maybe someone from Uber, if you're watching this, and I have a sneaky suspicion you are, maybe you would like to comment below and explain why doesn't Uber dispute the numbers if they are so wildly inaccurate. Please do that. You know, the comment section is below. You know how to use it. It's not too difficult. Also, for everyone else, if you like this video, like, favorite, share, subscribe. And if you enjoy my videos in general, please consider becoming a patron member for $1 a month. And as always, flame responsibly, and I will see you on the Daily Rideshare. Have a good one.